Welcome to this session of Understanding Human Anatomy. This video is the first of a series in which we'll discuss the structures within the mediastinum. Now, if you go back to the video on the pleura, I mentioned the mediastinum. The mediastinum is the area in the center of the thoracic cavity, the area between the two parietal pleura, between the left and right parietal pleura. And the mediastinum is divided into four regions: a superior mediastinum, and then inferior to the superior mediastinum is an anterior, a middle, and a posterior mediastinum. And I'll be talking about those a little bit more as we go on here. Now, I want to draw the structures of the mediastinum, and to do that, I want to start with sketching in some bony landmarks. So what I'm going to do is sketch in the bodies of vertebra. And we're going to start with T3, T4, T5, T6, T7, T8, T9, and then we'll sketch in the intervertebral disc. This will take a minute or so. Like so. So let me label the vertebra. So we remember T3, T4, T5, T6, T7, T8, Okay, and I'm going to draw one other frame of reference here. I'm going to draw a line through the bottom of T4. Right here. And this is the line that represents the sternal angle. Remember the structure, the junction of the manubrium and the body of the sternum is the sternal angle. Now, all of the mediastinum above the level of T4, above this line, is superior mediastinum. Below this line, we have the anterior, middle, and posterior mediastinums. And the heart and pericardium defines the middle mediastinum. So the anterior mediastinum is anterior to the pericardium, below the level of T4. The posterior mediastinum is posterior to the pericardium, below the level of T4. Now, one must remember that the exact position of the organs in the thorax, and in particular in the mediastinum, change positions, change locations in the superior-inferior direction with respiratory movements. In other words, as the diaphragm moves, the heart will move with it, and it will take other structures along with it as well. The lungs also move. They're not in the mediastinum, but they're also changing position. So when we do a slide like this, when we diagram something, we're going to make some assumptions, and the assumption we're going to make is we're going to draw the mediastinum as it looks at the beginning of a quiet inspiration, or right after a quiet expiration. Now, we're talking about the thorax, so we have to bring in the diaphragm. So let me sketch the diaphragm in here. And we'll start over here. And we come up to about T8. Then we come down a little bit. Then we come up, back up to T8. And then down. So this is the diaphragm. And again, it's one of our boundaries. So now we have some reference points with which to proceed with our diagram. We have the vertebra, we have the diaphragm, and for reference we have the level of the sternal angle. Recall that when I was talking about the thoracic wall in a previous video, I mentioned that when you looked at a cross-section through the thorax, the thoracic cavity is heart-shaped, and that there is a gutter on each side of the vertebra. One of the things we're going to find in that gutter is the sympathetic chain ganglia. These are the ganglia that run on either side of the thorax, and I'm sketching them in here. And they are part of the sympathetic nervous system. They contain nerve cell bodies of sympathetic neurons, and there's one ganglion for each spinal nerve in the thoracic and lumbar regions. And the reason they're called the sympathetic chain is that they are interconnected. There is nervous tissue running between these ganglia up and down the length of the torso in the gutter next to the vertebra from the beginning of the thorax to about the middle of the lumbar region. So these are the sympathetic chain ganglia. I'm only drawing a line to the one around T3, but they are bilateral. There's a chain on each side of the vertebral column. Okay, so there's the sympathetic chain. Now we'll see, coming from the sympathetic chain, some nerves that are passing down into the abdomen. And I'll sketch it in here. And the one I'm drawing in is the greater splanchnic nerve. And it receives axons from several of the sympathetic chain ganglia. And these axons are going down to the celiac ganglion in the abdomen, and they are providing prevertebral sympathetic innervation to the celiac ganglion. And these axons are bringing preganglionic sympathetic innervation down to the celiac ganglion. So the chain ganglia, and then the greater splanchnic nerve, and there are two other splanchnic nerves that all heading to the celiac ganglion. The other splanchnic nerves will originate a little bit inferiorly. So at that point, I'd like to stop this video and pick up our drawing in the next video. Thank you for your attention.